we came to this meeting and we were invited to participate in this TruCenter experience, and we shared 3 stories, and then it was put into this wonderful, simple assessment tool, and we got this report, and the report highlighted the things that God had wired me for based on my stories, the things that God had planted in me that are gifts intended to be a blessing to others, but things that I actually enjoy doing, things that I'm actually good at that also bless others. And so when you find that intersection of those 3 things, you'll find actually your calendar becomes very green, right? Very life-giving.
Welcome to the Post-Christian Podcast, where we help you make disciples in our increasingly post-Christian world. My name is Eric Bryant. I'm the campus pastor at Gateway in South Austin and Gateway Austin Online. I'm also the founder of Catalyzing Community. Sign up for our email newsletter at ericbryant.org and we'll send you free resources. On today's episode of the Post-Christian Podcast, I have a returning guest, my friend Dr. Tim Yee. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well. I got invited back, so I must have been on your somewhat good list, right?
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to talk about some of the improvements, additions to the TruCenter Assessment, which I've just fallen in love with. But before we jump into that, I want to just hear from you. You're someone who coaches pastors. Here we are, post-COVID, post-election. What are you discovering? I know some of your folks are across the country, perhaps even internationally. What are you seeing as common themes of ways you're encouraging pastors, ways that pastors need to be encouraged, perhaps?
Yeah, well, what I'm seeing is that pastors and leaders in churches need encouragement. I would definitely say that. I talk to dozens of leaders every week, and there are a lot of challenges. There's some great things going on, of course, but man, major challenges. And first of all, it's often just to keep going. If it's like they say, if you're going through hell, keep going, right? And so sometimes even in church and ministries, there's some really difficult times, and so God is present with you. I'm encouraging pastors and leaders in it, and I'm helping them find some tools, which includes prayer, includes scripture, includes spiritual growth activities. Just remember God is present. He's not abandoned you. But what are some things you can do to help move this thing forward? And so I'm seeing a lot of leaders in need and looking for help, but they're just so busy. Not big churches, small churches, they're busy. And so it's hard for them to find space to rest and to listen, and to get, I'll say, recharged even by the Holy Spirit. And so those are a few things I'm seeing. But I love serving leaders in this way. And I love what you're doing with your podcast. I know you have thousands of listeners, a lot of them pastors and ministry leaders who are looking for encouragement, looking for even a safe place to find some hope, find some growth steps that they can go deeper into their leadership.
Well, and remind me, what is your website for your coaching?
Yes, it is simply drtimye.com, drtimye.com. Very simple website. It's just a way for people to stay in touch with me, Catalyst Coaching and Consulting. And I love helping leaders of all types, whether they're inside the church or outside of the church. And I know we'll get to what I do full time as well, which using TruCenter to bless churches and ministries. But that's my personal website, and then I'll tell you the TruCenter website later.
Well, yeah. And before we jump into that, tell me a little bit about what is some of the advice for that busy pastor who's not figuring out ways to slow down, to rest, to recharge with the Spirit. What are some practical ways to help church leaders in that position do just that and learn to rest?
Yeah. Well, here's one thing. It's super practical. I remember it was actually a executive coach who was a pastor and a therapist worked with me on something, and I was going through a particularly busy, stressful time. And he encouraged me / challenged me in one of our sessions. He said, Tim, I want you to bring your calendar next week. So he said, print it out, your monthly view calendar, things that you can see the events on, so some way, whether it's paper or digital. And he just had me, color it. He's all, color things in green that give you life, and then color things in red that are draining you, and then color things in yellow that are kind of like neutral. And just the practice of reflecting on like my prior 30 days in the midst of my business, it was good to stop and just pray through that and say, Lord, how much of this am I listening to you, right? And what could my next 30 days look like that I would see more of the green? And the green was more like life giving, and it made me explore what brings me life. And then that actually led to some of the things I'm doing now, of course, but working with him, he really led me into that process of asking myself as a pastor and leader, am I connected to life giving things that God has made me for and for me to live into and to work in? Because when I'm doing those things, I am going to be more naturally energized, more joyful, actually even be more generally fruitful, even though we can't see everything on this earth, but we see some more fruit coming out because I'm just more in alignment with how God has intended me to serve. And
Mm.
so I call it it's like a calendar audit, right? It sounds kind of boring, but it's just look at your calendar and just start thinking about what's bringing me life, what's draining me, and how am I inviting God into that? Just that pause to reflect. You could take just 5 minutes to do that. I would encourage every busy pastor and leader to pause and reflect on their calendar and invite God into it.
That's such great advice. And I've found doing my own hours audit as very helpful. And I've even started to put in categories that I didn't used to track.
Hmm.
How many hours a week am I spending with leaders? How many hours a week am I spending with volunteers? How many hours am I spending with people who don't yet know Jesus? I find that to be
Yeah.
really rejuvenating. And that was something getting squeezed out of my calendar. And then even moving meetings off of an afternoon. If you can give
Hmm.
yourself an afternoon of solitude or a morning of solitude, maybe extend your writing time if you have
Yeah.
that already in your calendar. Just give yourself 2 or 3 more hours after that. I think those are some real practical steps. Well, the TruCenter Assessment has become my favorite. I just love working with this tool. And maybe for those who haven't heard the first episode where I interviewed you about it, give a little bit of the background. And then I want to hear about this new element, the 8 dimensions that help
Yeah.
summarize your top 5 motivations. But share a little bit about TruCenter with us.
Absolutely. Well, it was back in 2018 while I was still a pastor. It was actually with this executive coach. He was hosting a luncheon for pastors and wanted to introduce us to an earlier version of True Center. And the thing that's unique about it, because I've taken lots of other assessments and super helpful in the past, but this one is based off of your stories. And so we came to this meeting and we were invited to participate in this True Center experience. And we shared 3 stories, and then it was put into this wonderful, simple assessment tool. And we got this report, and the report highlighted the things that God had wired me for based on my stories, the things that God had planted in me that are gifts intended to be a blessing to others, but things that I actually enjoy doing, things that I'm actually good at that also bless others. And so when you find that intersection of those 3 things, you'll find actually your calendar becomes very green, right? Very life giving. I'm doing things I like, I'm doing things I'm good at. And when I do those things, it helps and blesses others. That to me is a very green calendar, and that's where he led me in that process all the way back in 2018, and now up until now I'm still in contact with him, trying to find those places. And that's what True Center does by using your stories. It just takes 30 minutes and you get this wonderful, very clean, simplified report to show you your top motivations in your number one dimension, which really helps you live and walk into the way that God has gifted you to lead and to serve.
Well, for me, as I've been trying to coach some folks using this assessment, it's been really helpful because, Myers Briggs, Strengths Finder, those are helpful tools as well, and still ones that I use, but they really describe more how you might do something. But this really gets at an area that I've never found until this assessment, which is why you do what you do. And even now with the dimensions, talk about the 8 dimensions. We don't have time to go into all of the different motivations that you can get in your results, but maybe just summarize the 8 dimensions for us.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to do that. So True Center, in comparison to these other wonderful tools, one of our coaches actually gave me this. She said, when we talk about other tools, I say they're kind of like an X-ray, super helpful. He said, but True Center is the MRI. It goes
Mm.
really deep, and it gets deep into your why. And we have found over 60 years of research, it's actually because of the stories, because stories are so interwoven into our personhood that they reveal really wonderful, insightful, and actionable insights into how God has made you. And so other assessments are kind of like that X-ray, and we're like that MRI. Now, what we found though, with that really deep dive in your top 5 motivations, it's so detailed, it's so accurate that we actually created the dimension side to simplify it a little bit. So we took all 32 motivations and we simplified them into 8 categories of dimensions. And we take the scores from all 32, and what we'll reveal to you in your report, the new report, as you've seen, is what is your number one dimension? What's the number one way that your motivational energy shows up on teams and on projects, in your marriage, in relationships with others? And so it's how your motivational energy and leadership shows up in relationship to other people. And it's a really fun, simple way to help leaders like you understand this is really how people see me. And how I'm gifted as an achiever or a driver or a learner or a relator or an optimizer or one of the 8 categories. So really good, deep insights on the top 5 motivations, and then this wonderful simplified tool with the dimensions to help you understand, Eric, how do I go deeper into my relationships on this team? It's like, well, look at your dimension, and that's really going to help you understand yourself. And as they take the TruCenter tool, their top dimension will show you how they will tend to show up on that team and in relationship with you.
Yeah, it's been so helpful. I'm really excited to take leaders and volunteers from our campus. In fact, if you don't mind, share about this special opportunity that you have for pastors.
Yeah, well, we had someone who experienced, True Center, found it amazingly powerful and blessed us with a grant. And so through the end of the year, and right now it's only guaranteed through 2024, I'm just reaching out to different churches and ministries that we've been working with and said, we have a wonderful grant that you can apply for to cover the cost of a lot of other tools that maybe you weren't able to afford prior. And so I want to extend that, Eric, to you and to your listeners as well, because I've worked with you for over a year with TruCenter. You've fallen in love with it. You've told many other leaders about it. It's powerful. And so the Eric Bryant podcast listeners, we'd love to empower them with the opportunity to apply. Again, before the end of the year, we'll put all the links in there as well. And if someone's listening to this in 2025, uh, still feel free to reach out. You never know. Maybe there's 1 or 2 left over, or maybe there's some extension, but right now it's just guaranteed till the end of the year that we want to get this in the hands of churches and ministry leaders so they can experience the power of TruCenter. And excited to get that to your listeners for sure.
We'll put this in my email newsletter and the show notes. And for those of you listening, if you want to take it for yourself, even before applying, I'll be giving away some free ones as well. Make sure you're signed up for my newsletter at ericbryant.org. Well, Tim, as you've been working with these dimensions and other churches and pastors, what are some of the best ways that churches have mobilized their people through this? I'm going to take 100 of my volunteers and leaders, through this in the new year. How would you recommend we really maximize our impact with this assessment?
Yeah, well, that's great. We love seeing churches of all sizes use it. We have a major conference in 2025. 10,000 leaders are going to go through it. It's going to be fantastic. But we love hearing churches who, a church I'm working with just last week, they're going to take 30 people at a new members class through TruCenter, and they're going through the TruCenter certification as you are doing. And so they can get some more insight into giving a thoughtful feedback on each person's TruCenter report. And so what's happening is that these churches are being able to connect with their people, listen to their stories, see their giftedness, and then invite them into this imaginative conversation about how could you see God putting things in you to be serving now in this season. It's so fun to see people who maybe had never volunteered before, finding a spot maybe inside the church, or maybe some seasoned servants who are looking for something that's connected to the church, but maybe in the community, so maybe not even on the church campus. And they're seeing that their dimensional gifting might show that they're a gifted driver. They just drive missions and goals and projects. And how fun to get that driver who's gifted in that dimension onto this community project that really didn't have a leader, didn't have any energy to keep moving forward. It might be tutoring to kids at a local school. And so we're seeing people using TruCenter for not only serving on the campus, but also offsite. And then also, Eric, it's just powerful insights for the believer personally. And so it's not just for people looking to serve in terms of a project on the campus or off the campus. If you're looking to grow spiritually, looking to learn about yourself, we have hundreds of leaders who are seeing insights, things they have not seen before. And that's powerful to get that self-awareness, to see how God has gifted you. And then you can pour back into more kingdom projects for God's purposes. It's awesome to see.
That is awesome. Maybe give us a couple of this. The driver one was fantastic. What are a couple other examples of either a dimension or a motivation and that shows you where to actually serve?
Yes. Well, the great thing about our tool is it shows you how God has gifted you, but it also shows you that even the things that you are scoring lower on, it means you actually can do those pretty well. They're just not as energizing to you. So, for example, for me, my top one was in the influencer dimension. I love influencing people with sermons for the good of the kingdom. I love helping shape and mentor people and persuading them to follow God's will and his ways. So that's how mine really shows up. And on the lower end is something called Optimizer. And Optimizer, they're really good at finding better ways to do things. They make work easier. They make things more effective. They fix both small and big things. So that's great. I actually do that. And I do it pretty well, but I realize I actually don't get energized by optimizing. And so I realized a lot of my ministry, Eric, in the first 20 years of my 27 years, I spent a lot of times optimizing because I was good at it, but I didn't realize it was actually draining me to do it. So something I did well. It actually ranked high in my Strengths Finder. It was kind of like this analytical gift I had, but I really actually got kind of drained by that strength. And so what really helped me to see is, man, God has made me to really influence and persuade for his purposes. And if I need to optimize, that's great, and I'll do it. But I just need to realize that actually drains me, where the influencing, persuading side actually fills me up more. So that's why for me as a pastor, I actually walked off stage every week energized. A lot of other pastors, they don't. And the reason why, we have different dimensional energy that God has placed in it. So we try to get pastors to lean into their top motivations, their top dimensions, because they naturally are energized the way God has made them. And then to recognize they're going to get drained by using the other disciplines, which is so important to do in the dimensions, but it may not be your natural number one. And so you might get drained, might be a little frustrated, maybe find some people to help you with those projects. That's just one way for me personally that I've seen it super helpful. We're using it in marriage ministries, really powerful, Eric. You and maybe your spouse will take it and you're able to compare not just your motivations, which is super insightful, but the dimension piece. You'll see the differences there of how you guys have synergy together and complement each other. And then you'll see these gaps of that's why we always have misunderstandings over that topic. And it'll be primarily because of the way you show up in your dimensions.
That's so good. Well, it's trucenter.co. That's TruCenter.co. Thank you so much, Tim. Really appreciate all you're doing to help us really make a difference.
Oh, thank you so much. And everyone will have all the ways to reach out to me, take advantage of that year-end grant as well, and other ways to connect with me in the new year. Thank you, Eric, for having me back on the show. And so excited to work with you. I'm going to be working with you a ton with TruCenter. It's going to be a ton of fun.
It's going to be great. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the Post Christian Podcast. More resources available at ericbryant.org.